On overnights,
I believe in reason and common sense.
Leith Van Onselen from Macro Business with the Treasury of Common Sense.
Common sense never goes out of style.
Now, how about this? There has been a survey of leading economists. You describe them as prominent economists, and it's been on the housing crisis. And what are the causes of the housing crisis? And they've blamed a whole range of peripheral issues, and they've ignored the fact that we have record rates of immigration. Leith Van Onselen from Macro Business joins us in the program every Thursday. G'day, Leith.
G'day, Clinton. Thanks for having me on.
Mate, these are so-called leading economists. What, they're blind to immigration, it seems.
Yeah, it's very strange. So the survey conducted by The Conversation, which is a sort of university-run news site, and it surveyed 49 so-called leading economists, and they're mostly from the university sector. And they basically were, had to come up with solutions for the housing crisis. And the number one solution was to ease planning restrictions. About two-thirds of them said that. There's a whole bunch of other stuff, mostly supply-side related things. But the curious one was only 6% said that we should lower immigration as a solution. And the strange thing about it, Clinton, is that 18% said that we should fast-track handing out visas to migrants to build homes. So effectively they want to import more migrants to build houses for migrants. And so, it's all a bit strange. Sorry, that was 14%. So 14% to fast-track immigration of home builders. So only 6% want lower immigration overall, but they actually want more immigration of, home builders. And the ridiculous thing about it is that, these are obviously economists who mostly work for the university. So I'd say they've got a vested interest in high immigration because they want to obviously pump it up through the international student market. But they really need to face the facts. I mean, the fact of the matter is, on the supply side, Australia's actually completed more homes per capita than almost any developed country in the world. We also have one of the highest, percentage of people working in the construction industry in the world. So, for example, according to OECD statistics, just over 5% of Australians work in construction, whereas the OECD average is only 3.3%. So we build a lot of homes. We have a lot of people working in construction to build homes and infrastructure. The problem that Australia's got is that we've also had the strongest population growth over the past 2 decades amongst developing nations. So, for example, since 2005, or between 2005 and 2023, Australia's population grew by 32%, and that was the second highest was New Zealand at 26%. But the OECD average over that time was only 12%. So we've grown at nearly 3 times the OECD average. And although we build a lot of homes, we're also growing the population so quickly that we don't have enough homes for that population. So instead of slowing down the number of people that we bring in so that the number of homes we build is enough, these economists have completely ignored it and have just said it's a supply issue. And the crazy thing about it is that the latest intergenerational report projected that Australia's population is going to grow by 13.5 million people over the next 39 years to 40.5 million. Now, that's the equivalent of adding another Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane to Australia in just 39 years. So by my calculations, we'd require around 6 million homes to be built in 39 years once you account for demolitions. We'd also need a hell of a lot of infrastructure for those people, and that infrastructure will obviously compete against home building, as we're finding at the moment when we don't have enough builders to do both. Yet instead of acknowledging that we should run lower immigration policy as a key solution to the housing crisis, these economists have completely ignored the issue, and more of them have actually said we should have more immigration, but just in the form of home builders to build homes for migrants. It's just that the whole debate in this country is just has become pure gaslighting, Clinton, quite frankly, and the facts are staring them in the face.
This is actually also what jumps out at me about where they believe the problems lie. Okay, so you mentioned easing planning restrictions is number one at 65%, but only trailing that by a couple of percent is providing more public housing. So are these university-paid academics, they're pointing the fingers at government saying you're not providing enough cheap housing for the public.
Yeah, pretty much. And the thing about it is, look, I agree we should have more public housing in this country. So we basically underbuilt for decades and decades and cut public housing and all that sort of thing. But you're never going to build enough when we literally, the projections is to grow the nation's population by 50% in only 39 years. And that's after we've already grown it by about a third this century. So we've already grown it by a third this century. In the last since 2005. and then we're supposed to grow it by, another 50% in 39 years. How are we ever going to build enough public housing for that? And how much is it going to cost? I mean, you can't just, these economists can't just always look at the supply side and say, oh, we just got to build more as the solution, when we are literally growing the population like a science experiment through excessive levels of immigration. And the fact of the matter is, until we reduce immigration to a level that's below the nation's capacity to build housing infrastructure, we're always going to have a problem. It's plain to see. We haven't built enough in the past 20 years. We've also forced people to live in high-rise, shoebox apartments instead of houses because, we have to densify to cater all these extra people. It's just really what we want. And, why don't economists look at the situation clearly and honestly and say, look, we're running the numbers too high. We're growing the population far too quickly. We have for the last 20 years. Let's slow it down a bit. It seems very logical.
And then you have a look at the demographic that suffers the most because of these record immigration levels, who have higher rates of unemployment, who have difficulty getting into the housing market, even renting a house. It's younger people. Yeah,
it is. And unfortunately, it's younger people who definitely suffer the most. And they suffer for, a number of reasons. So obviously, this extreme immigration we've had has clearly pushed rents through the roof. And younger people tend to be, renters more than older people who've, had longer to get in the housing market and they got in when it was cheaper. So they're getting hammered there. But the other thing they're getting hammered by is they're actually getting hammered in the employment market. So some data came out this week from Jobs and Skills Australia, which is, a federal government body. And it basically showed that despite the fact that we've had 1 million net overseas migrants land in the last 2 years, a record number, I'll add, by a long way, we actually have more extreme shortages in high-skilled positions than we had before we opened the border back in November 2021. However, employers are finding it easier, much easier than they did when they first opened the borders, to fill low-skilled positions. So what this tells you is that we've brought in a whole bunch of international students and lower-skilled migrants, etc. The economy is awash with low-skilled workers. Employers are finding it very, very easy to fill those positions, much easier than they did even before the pandemic. And that therefore is impacting young people because those low-skilled positions tend to compete with younger Australians who are entering the labour market, or those who are trying to get part-time work at uni, or those sorts of things. And most of the rise in Australia's unemployment rate in the last, over the last year or so has actually been in the 15 to 24-year-old cohort. So they have actually driven up Australia's unemployment rate. So we're effectively running an immigration program whereby we're flooding the place with, lower skilled workers. They compete with younger Australians for rental properties as well as for jobs. And as a result, younger Australians are suffering from obviously those higher rents, and they're also suffering from much higher unemployment because unemployment for them is growing a lot faster than it is for the rest of the economy and for other age cohorts. So, it's a pretty stupid, policy we're doing here. It's basically eating our youth. But the sad thing about it, Clinton, is that younger Australians are also the ones who are most likely to label someone racist or xenophobic if they dare argue for lower immigration. So they're kind of arguing against themselves.
It needs to be an election issue, and I think it will be an election issue in the next 9 months. Always good to talk to you, Leith. We'll catch up next week.
Yeah, thanks, Clinton. Speak to you next time.
Leith Van Onselen from Macro Business.